Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Donovan. I'm a PhD student at Cork Institute of Technology, and today I'll be discussing the paper I published with my two PhD supervisors, Dr. Aoife Johnson, Dr. Roy O'Reilly, titled Differentiation in Personality Emotion Mappings from Self-Reported Emotion and Automatically Classified Emotion. This paper discusses an experimental study that we conducted, and this paper was published at the 28th Irish Conference on Artificial Intelligence and Cognitive Sciences. So in terms of the key psychological variables that we studied, the two were personality traits and the basic emotions. Personality traits are the typical expressions of emotion, affect, behavior, cognition, and motivation across time. The predominant model of personality within psychology is the five-factor model. And the five-factor model argues that there exist five broad factors that are aggregates of a representative body of personality traits. And these five factors are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The pink notes indicated below are the hypothesized subtrait level of the personality trait hierarchy that have been argued for by researchers in Canada in the last 10 to 15 years. And it has been hypothesized that these subtraits enable higher resolution level of analysis with personality and other traits or other psychological variables such as emotions. The basic emotions are emotions that are distinct and reliably displayed through psychological, behavioral, and neurophysiological signals. The six canonical basic emotions are anger, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and surprise. And these are the six emotions that we considered in this research study. In terms of our motivation, our prior work that we published established emotional state to personality trait mapping based on self-report alone. However, we wanted to extend that work to incorporate other modalities such as facial expression analysis, but also in the future affective personality and semantic analysis, as with self-report and questionnaire-based methodologies for assessing and measuring complex phenomena such as personality. These methodologies come with a number of flaws. And what we argue is that a multimodal based methodological approach can act as a counterbalance for these flaws. Such flaws include that questionnaire based methodologies are static snapshots of, for example, personality, in that they assess personality at a specific time and place, and therefore external factors to personality on a given day can influence the person's self-reporting of their personality and biased results. So, for example, their self-esteem, whether they slept enough on that day, whether something terrible happened the day before or on that morning, and other factors that aren't specifically related to their personality. In contrast, multimodal-based methodological approaches are more holistic, we argue, in that they can incorporate data points from multiple time periods and places. Questionnaire-based methodological approaches suffer from artifact effects, and where the more time a person takes a specific personality questionnaire, the same personality questionnaire, the less accurate and valid the results become. In contrast, multimodal-based methodological approaches enable passive data collection where the participant doesn't need to alter their day-to-day behavior and can be tracked, let's say, or assessed via their normal activity with their smartphone or their computer or just through language, and thereby it's more resistant to artifact effects and thereby makes the ability to continuously assess personality more accurate and valid. Questionnaire-based methodologies limit the number of potential participants that can be recruited. There are two kind of separate issues why they limit the number of participants. One is just practical in terms of time constraints. So some personality questionnaires can take up to an hour to complete and have over 240 or have about 240 items or questions they have to answer, which is a deterrent for recruiting research participants. The second factor is the cognitive required to complete a personality questionnaire accurately, and such as like high level verbal fluency. In contrast, multimodal-based methodologies, because they enable passive data collection, are thereby more inclusive and accessible, and that they don't require the participant to have a high level of verbal fluency or to alter their behavior. That is the benefit of a passive data collection approach, in which multimodal-based methodologies support such as facial expression analysis. So given this research motivation, our main research question was, how does the relationship between personality traits and the basic emotions vary between the modalities of self-report and automated facial expression analysis? We contend that if the relationship or state-to-trait mappings can be replicated from self-reported mappings to automatically classified mappings, then this supports the enabling of bimodal and bidirectional emotional state to personality trait mapping, which is which itself is a stepping stone towards a multimodal based methodological approach for generating state to trait mappings. In terms of how we aim to answer this question was conducting an experimental study. So the figure below depicts our experimental procedure. We had an overall sample size of 38 participants. However, for this particular paper, we analysed 24 participants that had their facial features recorded, or their emotive facial expressions recorded. So for the procedure for each of these participants is the same. So first, participants answered the Big 5 ASCII scale, which is a measure of personality. They then watched 12 emotionally provocative film clips, and after each film clip, they answered a post-video emotion questionnaire. And this questionnaire asks them on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of the basic emotions, how much of each emotion they experienced during the previous video. Their facial expressions then were recorded and later analysed through an automatic emotive facial expression emotive classifier. And the data from this was then normalised and standardised to enable descriptive and inferential statistical analysis. We conducted an in-person R between the personality results with self-reported emotions and automatically classified emotions, and this resulted in a personality emotional state to personality trait mapping for both modalities. In terms of capturing emotive facial expressions, we use the automatic classifier, the emotion viewer platform, which uses facial landmark points to categorize emotive facial expressions. The figure below depicts the 3 outputs of the emotion viewer for joy, in this case labeled happy, anger and surprised. There are 3 key parameters for the emotion viewer platform, which is track phrase, track expression and voting count. The first 2 are required to enable emotive facial expression analysis. Voting count refers to how many consecutive cases of emotion need to be detected in order for the emotion viewer to output that emotion. In this case, we set the voting count to 10 as a conservative measure. So prior studies that have used the emotion viewer in terms of training data and also real-time videos on YouTube have found that it has an average accuracy across the 6 canonical basic emotions of 88%. Given all this, we had 3 main research questions that we wanted to answer in this experimental study. The first was, across the 5-factor model, is there more consistency than inconsistency in personality emotion mappings between the 2 modalities? The second one was, what was the degree of overlap between self-reported emotions and automatically classified emotions? And third, how effective are the emotional stimuli in generating self-reported emotional reactions? For the emotional stimuli, we had 12 videos, and 9 of those were previously used in independent research groups and 3 were introduced in this research study. Here is our resulting emotional state to personality trait mapping. Personality traits of the 5-factor model and their subtraits are indicated in the first column. The emotions are indicated in the first 2 rows in terms of each emotion and their respective modality. SR indicates self-reported personality trait to emotion mapping, and A automatic classified state to trait mapping. This resulting mapping indicates the direction of any mapping is indicated by color. Red indicates a negative relationship, white no relationship, and green a positive relationship. The strength of that relationship is indicated by the shades, so darker shades, whether green or red, indicate a stronger negative or positive relationship. The effect size then is also included within each cell of this resulting mapping. In terms of our analysis, we define a consistent mapping as when the direction of the correlation is the same, so both positive or both negative, and the existence of a substantial effect size, so greater than 0.10 or less than minus 0.10. So we can see the mapping between openness to experience and joy match this criteria, where they're both positively correlated between the 2 modalities, and they also have substantial effect sizes. However, the mapping between openness to experience and surprise did not. Even though the self-reported emotion was also positively correlated, it did not meet a substantial effect size or substantial effect size threshold. In terms of an inconsistent mapping, we define inconsistent mapping with the direction the correlation between the two modalities goes in the opposite direction, so one positive, one negative, or one negative, one positive, and the existence again of substantial effect sizes. We find that the relationship between intellect and surprise matched this criteria, where the relationship between intellect and sadness did not. In terms of each of the 5 factors and their subtraits, we found for openness to experience and openness, there existed more consistency than inconsistency that matched our criteria. We found, whereas for intellect, there was an equal amount. So, in terms of consistent mappings, openness to experience, openness, and intellect consistently and positively map between two modalities with the emotion joy. This is supportive of past research studies which have found a consistent, or have argued a consistent relationship between the emotion joy and openness to experience, as joy seems to be involved in encouraging exploratory behavior, which is a key aspect of openness to experience, openness and intellect. Openness to experience had a positive mapping with the emotion disgust, and openness with surprise. In terms of inconsistent mappings, we found inconsistent mappings between openness to experience and openness with sadness, where the self-reported emotions were positive, but the automatic classified emotions were negative, and with intellect and surprise. In terms of conscientiousness, we found for across all 3 traits, there existed more consistency than inconsistency. All 3 traits consistently mapped and positively mapped to the emotion anger. There was also a consistent mapping found between conscientiousness and ordinance with disgust. This is consistent with past research, which has hypothesized that a key aspect of conscientiousness, and in particularly ordinance, is a sensitivity to disgust, to experiencing disgust. And this is argued to be a motivator of conscientious behavior. Conscientious people are very orderly, industrious, they're very hardworking, they're rule-orientated, and they can be seen as quite strict. And it seems to be, it has been argued that a key aspect of that is that they're quicker to experience disgust, which motivates them to act conscientiously, which is our findings support this hypothesis. In terms of an inconsistent mapping, we found an inconsistent mapping between the 3 traits in sadness, where the self-reported emotion was positive and the automatic classified emotion mapping was negative. In terms of extroversion, we found that for the subtrait enthusiasm, there existed more consistency than inconsistency, whereas for extroversion, there was an equal amount. There was no consistent or inconsistent relationship found for assertiveness and any of the emotions. This was the only personality trait that did not match our criteria for either consistency or inconsistency. In terms of past research, the findings that extroversion and enthusiasm positively mapped and correlated with joy is consistent in that it has been continuously found in the personality science research that a key aspect of extroversion is sensitivity to experiencing positive emotion on a day-to-day basis, and our findings support that. For agreeableness, we found that for the trait agreeableness and its subtrait of compassion, there existed more consistency than inconsistency. We found an equal amount for the subtrait politeness. In terms of interesting research given past research findings, we found the inconsistent mapping between anger, agreeableness, and compassion noteworthy. It has been an open question in the field whether people high in agreeableness are less likely to experience anger, or they're less likely to report it or express it. Our self-reported emotional state to personality trait mappings supports the first hypothesis that people high in agreeableness and compassion are less likely to experience anger, whereas the automatically classified emotion now suggests that they do experience it, but are less likely to self-report it and are more likely to express it in non-verbal and potentially unconscious ways. In terms of why this may be the case, people high in agreeableness are pro-social and they do not, quote-unquote, like to rock the boat, and they act in ways that benefits their in-group. And anger is an emotion that can cause in-group or group disharmony or conflict between people. And as a result, it might be the case that people high in the group in this are less likely or feel more shame about experiencing anger, and therefore less likely to self-report it, but they still express it. In terms of neuroticism, we found that for neuroticism, there's two subtraits, withdrawal and volatility. There existed more consistency than inconsistency. The only emotion where we did not find a consistent mapping between the three traits and an emotion was with fear. So for fear, the self-reported emotion state, the personality trait mapping was positive, whereas for the automatic classified emotional state, the personality trait mapping, it was negative. Now, this is interesting given that past research has shown that there is a consistent link found between neuroticism and fear, such as that it seems to be one of the fundamental drivers in neuroticism is the sensitivity to experiencing fear. This is supported by our self-reported emotional state to personality trait mappings, but not by the automatic classified mappings. Now, there's potentially two reasons for this. One is psychological in nature, in that people who are in neuroticism tend to be very self-conscious, very aware about the feelings of thoughts of others about themselves, and they are uncomfortable with being vulnerable. Now, fear is an emotion that is inherently vulnerable, as fear indicates to broadcast to other people that there's something in the environment that this person finds threatening. So it might be the case that people high in neuroticism, they do experience fear, but because in this study they're being recorded, they try to suppress any expression of fear. The second explanation is just more practical in nature, in that some of the participants that we had when it came to emotional stimuli that were fear related or were expected to cause fear looked away, covered their face, and potentially diverted their eye attention to other parts of the screen. And it might be that people high in neuroticism were the people who did this. Now, given the ethical requirements for a study, we couldn't connect any piece of personality information or data to any particular person in terms of I couldn't link this personality score to this person, this particular video recording to enable anonymity. We can only do it on a generalized abstract level. So we can actually verify that. Now, in a future study, we'll be able to do this, and we'll be able to assess whether people high in neuroticism are more likely to take actions that protect them, so to speak, from whatever fear-related emotional stimuli is being shown. In terms of our second research question, the correlation between the two emotional modalities, we found that for 4 of the 6 basic emotions, the self-reported emotion positively correlated with its automatically classified counterpart. However, for only 2 of these, sad and surprise, did it reach a substantial effect size. There was, for 2 of the emotions, anger and disgust, had a negative correlation with its counterpart between the two modalities. However, again, the effect size was trivial. In terms of the emotional stimuli that we used, we introduced 3 that were, as far as we know, never used in emotional stimuli research. We used Peep Show, Test Your Awareness, and Annabelle. Now, for 2 of these 3 newly introduced emotional stimuli, Test Your Awareness and Annabelle, they are highly successful in eliciting at least one strong experience of emotion. So for Test Your Awareness, I had the strongest mean experience of surprise. So it's, again, the scale was from 1 to 5. So it produced on a general level a very high amount of surprise across the entire participant pool, and it was the highest surprise emotion for the experiment. For Annabelle, we found that it had the strongest mean experience for fear across the entire participant pool. However, for the video Peep Show, this we expected it to produce a high level of joy. However, it only produced a small to moderate level of surprise, and overall, we would not recommend it for future research usage. In terms of the videos that have been used by prior independent research, with the exception of See You Love, we can recommend these. We can testify to their ability to produce reliable expressions of emotions. However, for the Sea of Love, which had been previously been shown to be a reliable elicitor of surprise, we found only produced surprise to a small to moderate amount. In terms of conclusions, we conclude for research question 1, the results indicated there was more greater consistency than inconsistency. So for 11 of the 15 personality traits, we found more consistency than inconsistency. For research question 2, we found that there was greater consistency, but the results were not conclusive, which may have been an artifact of the effect size, which is rather small, of 24 participants. And for research question 3, we found that we can recommend 10 of the 12 videos for researchers who are interested in evoking or eliciting emotional reactions. Overall, we believe the results support the development of a bimodal, bidirectional emotional state to personality trait methodology for self-report and automatically classified facial expressions in terms of emotions. In terms of future work, we believe that effective computing is in a prime position to capitalize on this research. We aim to increase the sample size to conduct a large-scale mapping between the modalities of self-report and emotive facial expression analysis. We want to investigate alternative tools for the analysis of motor facial expressions. So our emotion platform, the Emotion Viewer, uses facial landmark points. We want to compare and contrast it with other approaches such as the facial action coding unit system, initially developed and popularized by Paul Ekman. And we also want to integrate other modalities in our large-scale mapping. So that includes affective personality and semantic analysis. And thereby we want to assess whether to assess the validity of a multimodal-based methodological approach for generating state-to-trait mappings and for also assessing personality traits. So that concludes my talk for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact either myself at brendan.donovan@mycat.ie or my two PhD supervisors, Aoife Johnson at aoife.johnson@cat.ie or Rory or my other PhD supervisor, Dr. Rory O'Reilly at rory.o'reilly@cat.ie. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.